they have to make this case that all inequality throughout society is evidence of inequity. To reach this stunningly idiotic conclusion, they employ the following argument. Wokeness makes a very strong claim with regard to inequality. Wokeness claims that all inequality in life is evidence of inequity. Now, this is a semantic trick, right? You understand that they're taking the word equality and then they're taking the word equity, and they are hoping that you noticed that a syllable just went missing there. And that when they say inequality and inequity, what you really think is, okay, well, equity is a good thing. And so if something is unequal, that means it's not equity. Okay, these words have completely different meanings. Okay, if something is unequal, this does not imply that something unfair happened. If you worked hard for your pay today and somebody else did not work hard for their pay today, you received unequal wages. This does not mean that some deep, abiding unfairness has taken place. But nonetheless, they have to make this case that all inequality throughout society is evidence of inequity. To reach this stunningly idiotic conclusion, they employ the following argument. They begin with, all people are created equal. Not in their rights. All people are created equal. You are equal to the person sitting next to you in every conceivable way. Thus, if you are equal to the people sitting next to you in every conceivable way, any groups are equal in any conceivable way. Because again, if you are all exactly the same, doesn't matter how I divvy up the room, any group is going to be the same as any other group. Thus, all disparate results between groups can only be due to either natural differences or discrimination. But it can't be natural differences because you're exactly the same as the person sitting next to you. So it must be discrimination. Right? So that's the sort of idiotic syllogistic logic that's being used here. Now, the problem is that pretty much every single one of these premises is false. Now, unless you think that I'm exaggerating the case, that I'm just making up what the wokes say about this, they say it right out. It's not like they're hiding the ball here. Ibram X. Kendi, who for some odd reason has been hailed as some sort of intellectual giant, when the man has intellectual wattage that, if translated to electric capacity, might be able to toast a piece of bread lightly. Ibram X. Kendi argues, quote, as an anti-racist, when I see racial disparities, I see racism. Any racial disparities, this means racism. This also means, as the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of African American History and Culture proposes, that inequality exists, and thus all racial groups struggle under white supremacy. Now, again, every single one of the premises that we just discussed is false. All people are not created equal in every single way. We are created equal in the sight of God. That means that we have individual rights before God. That does not mean that you are equal to the person sitting next to you in any sort of capacity. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But I would guess that in most capacities of life, you are very different than the person who is sitting next to you. You have different skill sets. You have different innate qualities. You've grown up differently. You make different choices. Secondly, if all of us are different, this means that not all groups are going to be equal. Any two groups, anywhere, are going to have different characteristics. If I took a line and I split this room, this half and this half, there would be different average characteristics in this half of the room versus that half of the room. That is just a statistical reality. On average, groups are different. Finally, differences between groups could be due to natural differences, i.e., if you take a group and they are very old, they're going to have natural differences with a group that's very young. So, for example, if you look at income statistics, very often you'll see certain groups compared to other groups in terms of income. Well, what if the average age of one group is very different than the average age of another group? That happens to be the case in the United States, by the way, between black and white. The average age of white Americans is closer to 60. The average age of black Americans is closer to 25. And what does that mean? It means that on a wealth level, you would expect older people to have more wealth. They've had a lifetime of accruing wealth. So you have to adjust for age if you actually wish to even out the stats, for example. Okay, this is true with every group. Men and women have very different innate qualities. I know I hate to break that to the left. Men and women, very different. Stuff we've known since we were small children and then had to unlearn because our college professors are largely idiots.